U.S. authorities have confirmed the discovery of more than 1 million additional documents that may be connected to the leaked investigation into the late financier Jeffrey Epstein. The newly identified material has been described as potentially relevant to past federal inquiries and is now under formal review by the United States Department of Justice. According to official statements, the documents were uncovered by the FBI and the Office of the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York. After identifying the material, both agencies informed the Department of Justice and transferred the files, so they could undergo a required legal review process. The Justice Department has stated that teams of lawyers are currently working around the clock to examine the documents. Their task is to identify information that can legally be released to the public while ensuring that required redactions are made. These redactions are primarily intended to protect the identities of victims and to avoid interfering with any active or ongoing criminal investigations. Officials have emphasized that the review process is complex due to the sheer volume of material involved. With more than 1 million documents now under consideration, Department of Justice has warned that the release process could take several weeks. The department says it intends to publish the documents as soon as legally possible. Once all necessary safeguards are in place, this development follows the recent release of thousands of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein after the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The legislation was approved by Congress and signed into law by U.S. President Donald Trump. The law directs the Department of Justice to make Epstein-related records available to the public, while still complying with federal laws that protect victims and the integrity of investigations. The initial release of documents last week included emails, memos, and investigative materials dating back several years. However, many of these files were heavily redacted, with names and identifying details blacked out. This prompted criticism from lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle, who argued that the level of redaction went beyond what the law permits under the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The Department of Justice is allowed to redact information only under specific circumstances. These include protecting victims' identities, safeguarding minors, and preserving active criminal investigations. The law explicitly states that information cannot be withheld simply to prevent embarrassment or reputational harm to individuals mentioned in the records. Several members of Congress have expressed concern that the public still lacks clarity about how federal authorities handled earlier investigations involving Epstein and his associates. In particular, lawmakers have called for greater transparency regarding internal decision-making processes, including who was investigated, who was not charged, and why certain prosecutorial decisions were made. The law specifically requests internal communications, including emails and memoranda, that explain decisions to charge, not charge, investigate, or decline to investigate Epstein or individuals associated with him. Supporters of the legislation argue that releasing this information is essential to restoring public trust in the justice system. Among the documents released in the first batch were emails that appear to have been exchanged between FBI personnel in 2019. These communications referenced a group of individuals described as possible co-conspirators in Epstein's crimes. The documents indicated that subpoenas had been served to several people in different states, including Florida, New York, Massachusetts, and Connecticut. It is important to note that being mentioned in investigative documents or receiving a subpoena does not mean an individual has been charged with a crime. Legal experts frequently emphasize that subpoenas are investigative tools used to gather information and do not imply guilt or wrongdoing. For survivors of Epstein's abuse, the issue of transparency remains deeply personal. Many victims have said that understanding how Epstein is able to evade accountability for so long is a critical part of their pursuit of justice. Advocacy groups have also argued that full disclosure could help prevent similar failures in the future. Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in 2019 on federal sex trafficking charges involving minors. He died later that year while being held at a federal detention center in New York, in what authorities ruled a suicide. His death ended the criminal case against him, but did not eliminate questions surrounding his network of associates or the handling of prior investigations. Over the years, Epstein's case has become a symbol of broader concerns about wealth, power, and accountability within the criminal justice system. Critics argue that earlier plea agreements and prosecutorial decisions allowed Epstein to avoid harsher consequences for years, potentially enabling continued abuse. The Department of Justice has repeatedly stated that it is committed to complying fully with federal law and with the directives outlined in the Epstein Files Transparency Act. Officials say they are balancing the public's right to know with their legal and ethical responsibility to protect victims and ensure due process. The newly discovered documents have renewed public interest in the case and intensified scrutiny of the Department of Justice, and the FBI lawmakers have said they will continue to monitor the document release process closely and may pursue additional oversight if they believe the law is not being fully implemented. Some legal analysts have pointed out that document reviews of this scale are uncommon and require significant resources. Each file must be examined individually to determine what information can be released and what must remain confidential under federal law. The Justice Department has not provided details about how or where the additional documents were discovered. Officials have also not commented on whether the files contain new information or are primarily records that had not previously been cataloged or processed. Despite the uncertainty, officials have stressed that transparency remains a priority. The department has said it will continue to release documents in stages as they are cleared for public disclosure, rather than waiting until the entire collection has been reviewed. Lawmakers supporting the transparency effort argued that releasing information incrementally could help maintain public confidence and demonstrate accountability. However, critics warn that partial releases may also fuel speculation if not accompanied by clear explanations in context. YouTube and other platforms hosting discussions about the Epstein case have also emphasized the importance of responsible reporting. Content creators are encouraged to rely on verified information, avoid unproven allegations, and respect the privacy and dignity of victims as the review process continues. Victims' advocates are urging officials to ensure that survivors' voices remain central to the conversation. Many stress that the ultimate goal of transparency should not be sensationalism, but accountability, reform, and prevention. The Epstein case has already prompted changes in how federal authorities handle sex trafficking investigations, particularly those involving powerful or well-connected individuals. Supporters of the transparency law hope that releasing these documents will further contribute to meaningful institutional reforms. For now, the Department of Justice says the public should expect additional document releases in the coming weeks. Officials reiterate that the pace of disclosure will depend on how quickly legal reviews can be completed without compromising victims or ongoing legal matters. As attention remains focused on the Epstein files, lawmakers, victims, and the public alike continue to call for answers. The discovery of more than 1 million additional documents underscores the scale and complexity of the case, as well as the enduring demand for transparency and accountability within the justice system.